It started with a quiet night and two men who believed no one would remember them. But 40 years later, the name Ashfield still stirs unease in anyone who lived through that cold November in 1986. They called it a simple smash and grab. Two masked robbers breaking into a luxury clothing store at the edge of downtown Los Angeles. But it wasn't just any boutique. Montrose Atelier was known to serve only the most exclusive clientele: businessmen, politicians, and, according to whispers, members of the Calderon cartel. The store's owner, a man named Victor Ramos, was rumored to launder millions through silk suits and imported leather. That rumor would turn into the core of one of California's strangest and most elusive crimes. At 2:47 a.m., November 14th, 1986, two men, later identified only as Dale and Reed, forced open the rear door with a crowbar. The alley was wet from an earlier drizzle, reflecting the dim orange of a broken streetlight. They wore mechanic overalls, gloves, and black ski masks. Inside, the store alarm was cut within seconds. Whoever they were, they knew the wiring. Within 6 minutes, they stripped the racks of over 50 tailored pieces, cashmere coats, crocodile skin belts, designer jackets, and a few custom-made suits rumored to belong to Hector Calderon himself. The estimated value? Just over $2 million in 1986 money. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't cash. It was something worse, something traceable. By dawn, the front door of Montrose Atelier hung open. A local paperboy noticed shattered glass and called the police. Officer report, time-stamped 6:12 a.m., noted, no forced entry from the front. Alarm disabled manually. Security footage missing. Detective Harold Whitman arrived on scene later that morning. He was 53, methodical, the kind of man who'd rather read than talk. It didn't look like a random hit, he later said in an archived interview. They knew exactly what they wanted, and they were gone before anyone could blink. His partner, rookie detective Alan Price, had a different read. He believed it was personal. This wasn't about money, Price said. It was about sending a message. For weeks, the case spun in circles. The insurance claim filed by Ramos raised eyebrows, 4 times the store's annual profit. There were whispers that Ramos himself staged the robbery, hoping to collect the payout and vanish to Mexico. But that theory collapsed when he was found beaten in his office 2 days later. It wasn't random, Whitman said. It was retribution. Archive recording, 1986. Police audio, log 12-47B. Whitman, you're saying he was alone when you found him? Officer, yes, sir. Door locked from the inside. Whitman, then whoever did this had a key. Rumors began swirling. Some said Calderon's men were cleaning house after discovering Ramos's betrayal. Others claimed Ramos had double-crossed the wrong buyers. Yet through all the noise, one simple fact remained. None of the stolen clothes were ever found. Then came a strange lead. 2 weeks after the robbery, a drifter named Evan Boyd walked into a pawn shop in Fresno carrying a tan garment bag. Inside was a suit with a silk label reading Montrose Exclusive, Custom for HC. When questioned, Boyd said he found it near an abandoned gas station off Route 178. The detectives drove there the next morning. Behind the cracked pavement, past the rusting sign, they found tire tracks leading into the desert. About a mile out, they discovered a burned-out van, engine cold, interior stripped. No fingerprints, no plats. But one object survived the fire, a fragment of a shopping tag with faint ink. Ramos Collection, Fall 86. It was the only physical evidence linking the crime to the robbers. The van was traced to a fake rental company in Long Beach. Everything pointed to professionals, or men pretending to be professionals. As 1986 turned into 1987, the case went cold. The press moved on. $2 million in silk. One headline read, "Gone without a trace." Detective Whitman retired the following year, handing over the unsolved file to the archives. But Alan Price couldn't let it go. He started rereading the case every December, marking the anniversary of what he called a ghost crime. Transcript, 1988 radio interview. Price, people think it's over, but money doesn't disappear. Someone buried that loot, and someday they'll dig it up. He was right. 2 years later, March 12th, 1988, a hiker in the Mojave Desert reported seeing two men digging at night near a dry creek. The local sheriff responded hours later, but by the time they arrived, the men were gone. All that remained was a half-collapsed hole and traces of burlap fibers. The case briefly resurfaced in the media, but no arrests were made. The truth was simpler and darker than anyone suspected. Dale and Reed, old friends from Ashfield, a working-class suburb north of LA, had planned the heist for months. Dale worked as a part-time electrician at Montrose Atelier. Reed was a former mechanic with a gambling problem. They weren't professionals. They were desperate. Reed owed nearly $60,000 to a local loan shark connected to the cartel. The two believed stealing from Ramos would erase Reed's debt and give him a way out. But once the cartel realized what had been taken, their own property, Reed's life turned into a ticking clock. For safety, they buried the stolen clothes in airtight trunks in the desert, promising to retrieve them when things cooled down. 2 years later, they returned under the cover of night. The hiker's report wasn't wrong. They were there. But someone else was too. Witness statements later revealed that a beige sedan was parked not far from the creek that night. The driver was never identified, but tire imprints matched those found near Ramos's office back in 1986. Someone was watching. By early 1989, both Dale and Reed vanished from Ashfield. Their families told conflicting stories. One said they'd moved to Texas for construction work. Another claimed they'd joined a freight company up north. In truth, they were hiding. For 4 long years, nothing happened. No sightings, no confessions, no sales of stolen goods. Until spring of 1992, when a new detective reopened the Montrose file. Her name was Claire Benton, 29, sharp, one of the first women in the department's major crimes division. She grew up reading Whitman's reports and decided to trace the loose ends he'd left behind. She started with the burn van. Technology had improved. Forensic labs could now test for micro-residues. Inside a rusted vent, they found a single hair, synthetic, likely from a wig. And beneath the driver's seat, a melted coin. Mexican peso, 1985 mint. Lab report excerpt. File hashtag 92-110B. Material, synthetic fiber, polyester blend. Possible match to costume wigs, brand Klein Theatrical Supplies, distributed Los Angeles, 1986. Benton visited the old Klein shop on Wester Avenue. The owner, now retired, remembered 2 customers from back in the day who'd bought wigs, gloves, and makeup kits. He even kept receipts. One name stood out, R. Miller. That was Reed's real last name. The discovery reignited the case. Newspapers ran headlines again. Ashfield robbers may still be alive. The department set up a task force, combing through old witness statements and new databases. Benton worked late nights, re-listening to Whitman's tapes. One stood out. Archive audio, 1986. Interview with unknown informant. Informant, they buried it. Somewhere dry, somewhere nobody goes. The kind of place you only see when you've got nothing left to lose. Whitman, who are they? Informant, 2 ghosts from Ashfield. You'll know when they come back for it. For years after that warning, the ghosts did return. And this time, they weren't alone. June 7, 1990. A farmer outside Palmdale reported hearing 2 gunshots echoing from the dunes. Police searched the area, but found nothing. Then, in August 1992, a sandstorm uncovered a fragment of metal in that same region. It was the corner of a trunk. Inside, detectives found something astonishing. Not money, not drugs, but silk, sealed in plastic, untouched by time. Every item still carried its Montrose tag. The $2 million wardrobe had survived 6 years underground. But there was something else buried beneath the fabric, something that changed the case forever. A torn photograph. 2 men, unmasked, standing beside the very same trunk. One of them, identified as Dale Carson. The other, still unknown. The image was dated March 12, 1988. The same night, the hiker reported 2 men digging in the desert, which meant someone else had been there taking that photo. Someone who knew. Archive note. Case file hashtag M92-221. The photographer remains unidentified. Photo appears developed on Kodacolor film, common retail batch, 1987 to 1988. Detective Benton kept the photo pinned above her desk. She later said in an interview, "That image haunted me. It wasn't just proof they were alive. It was proof someone else owned them." By now, the department had enough to reopen the investigation fully. Search warrants were issued across Ashfield and Bakersfield. Dale's mother, frail and half-blind, told police through tears. They said they'd come back rich. They said 2 years and it'll all be over. But after that night, I never saw my boy again. Then came the turning point, what the press later called the Ashfield letter. In late October 1992, a package arrived at the Los Angeles County Police Department. No return address. Inside was a folded map of the Mojave, marked with a red X and a short note. "If you dig deeper, you'll find more than silk." Detective Benton, against the advice of her superiors, drove to the coordinates alone. Under a layer of compacted sand, she found a second trunk, but it wasn't full of clothes. It contained 2 wallets, a rusted revolver, and a cassette tape labeled Reed, November 1986. She took the evidence back to the lab. The tape, damaged but recoverable, carried a single man's voice, hoarse, nervous, almost confessional. Transcript excerpt, Reed tape, recovered 1992. Reed voice, "If anyone finds this, tell my mother I tried. It was never about the money. We thought we could make it right. But once you take from men like Ramos, there's no going back. They own your silence." The revelation shook the department. Benton believed the robbery wasn't just theft. It was cover for something larger, something involving Ramos and the Calderon network. She suspected Dale and Reed weren't just robbers. They were pawns. The night the tape was found, Benton requested an official reopening of the Ashfield robbery as a possible homicide case. 2 weeks later, the bodies of 2 unidentified men were found near a dried-out well, 30 miles from the original burial site. Dental records matched Dale Carson and Reed Miller. Both had been dead for years. But the tape hinted at a third man, the one who'd taken the photo, the one who'd been watching them in the desert, the one who'd sent the map, the man who'd never been caught. When the sun rose over the Mojave the morning after the tape was found, Detective Claire Benton stood alone beside the excavation site, the desert wind carrying the smell of rust and dry heat. The discovery of Dale and Reed's remains should have been the end of the story. But something about the note, the map, and the mysterious photographer didn't fit the narrative. The robbery, the burial, the deaths, someone had been directing it all from the shadows. Benton believed that person was still alive. The FBI joined the investigation in early 1993, calling it Operation Threadline. The tape was digitized, and analysts enhanced a faint sound in the background. An engine, idling, with a low metallic hum. It wasn't a van. It was heavier, like a pickup truck. Using sound analysis, they traced the make to a 1985 Ford F-150 with a cracked muffler. That detail matched an unregistered vehicle spotted in Ashfield 2 days before the robbery. The owner on paper? A shell company registered under the name Hector V. Ramos Holdings. Ramos had been dead since 1986. But his accounts still existed, quietly active, transferring small amounts of money to unknown recipients. Benton dug deeper into those transactions. They led to a warehouse in Barstow, abandoned for years, but still drawing power from the grid. When she entered it with a warrant, she found boxes of clothing, all with Montrose tags, stored in perfect condition. But these weren't the stolen items. They were new, recent reproductions, dated 1991 and 1992. Someone was remaking the stolen line. That discovery reframed the case. The robbery wasn't just theft. It was intellectual property, blueprints, measurements, designs. Montrose Atelier's patterns had been used to produce black market luxury goods for the elite clients of the Calderon cartel. Ramos wasn't laundering money through clothes. He was laundering identity, dressing men in untouchable power. The stolen suits symbolized status, and Dale and Reed had stumbled into the heart of that operation. One of the boxes in the Barstow warehouse contained a file of shipping receipts. Benton traced one to a tailor in Tijuana. The tailor, an elderly man named Jorge Mendez, said he remembered two Americans visiting in 1987, bringing samples of fabric and sketches. One of them was scared, Mendez told her. He said if the wrong people saw him, he'd disappear. When shown the photo recovered from the desert, Mendez pointed to the unknown man beside Dale and Reed. That one. He came back alone in 1989. Said the others were gone. The third man had a name, Frank Dalton. Benton found him listed once in an old Montrose payroll file as a driver. Dalton had worked part-time for Ramos, delivering shipments late at night. Then he vanished. Through bank records, she found small cash deposits under Dalton's mother's name up until 1992. The trail ended abruptly a month before the mysterious letter arrived at the precinct. It was enough for a warrant. On May 3, 1993, detectives raided a trailer on the outskirts of Needles, California. Inside, they found a faded photo of Ramos shaking hand with a man who appeared to be Calderon, and on the back, the words for insurance. They also found Dalton's fingerprints on a half-burned envelope matching the paper from the Ashfield letter. But Dalton himself was gone. Neighbors said he'd left 2 weeks earlier in an old pickup truck, muttering that the desert remembers. That phrase stuck with Benton. She began to believe Dalton wasn't running. He was returning. The department organized a massive search along the old burial routes, focusing on the dry creeks and sand dunes where the original trunks were found. After 5 days, a metal detector beeped near a collapsed pit. They dug and unearthed a third container, smaller, lighter. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing Ramos with police officers, businessmen, and a few faces Benton recognized from her own department. It was evidence of corruption stretching decades. The robbery had never been about clothes or money. Dale and Reed had stolen leverage, blackmail material hidden in tailored suits. When they tried to retrieve it, the cartel found out. Ramos was silenced, the robbers executed, and Dalton, the driver, became the unwilling keeper of the secret. Benton presented the photos to her superiors, expecting immediate arrests. Instead, the file was classified within hours. 2 days later, her access was revoked, and she was reassigned to traffic enforcement. Officially, the case was concluded due to insufficient evidence. Unofficially, she kept a copy of the Reed tape and one photograph from the desert trunk. Ramos was a city official who would later become chief of police. Over the next decade, every attempt to reopen the case was blocked. But in 2004, when digital archives were finally scanned for public release, a journalist named Peter Lang found Benton's forgotten memo detailing the second trunk and the letter. He contacted her. Benton, now retired and living near Santa Barbara, agreed to meet. The two spent weeks reconstructing the timeline, comparing reports, and following leads that had once been silenced. They discovered that in 1994, a man matching Dalton's description was found dead in a motel near Reno, registered under a false name. The autopsy listed heart failure, but Lang found inconsistencies, missing files, lost photographs, uncollected belongings. Among the few items logged was a cassette labeled Reed Copy. The tape had disappeared before analysis.